All right, so chapter 3 is where we are, ladies and gentlemen, and we will look today. I'm just going to go in a traditional sort of say way. I like to go over some of the material in chapter 3 and highlight some of the important parts that I really want you to understand, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of a discussion if we have an opportunity to do that. Chapter 3 is on deep structure of culture. And so that, of course, concerns family and social organization and, any kind of religious structures that we are part of, or ideological structures, whatever you want to call them. But basically, that's that's what we're going to focus on. Because as I said, our culture is what, sort of say causes us to communicate the way we do. So that's what I'd like to look at in this chapter, and then consider how that affects our communication. Okay. So the chapter begins. This is page 68. Actually, begins with this introduction of this term, deep structure. Okay, deep structure and deep structure of the culture. Now, hopefully, you understand what is meant by that. That essentially, we have within our culture something that is so sort of say solidly buried, each one of us, that we really can't get it out. I mean, if we try to get away from it, it will change absolutely everything. So so this idea of deep structure within our culture, this is when our culture tells us how and why things should work this way, or how should I understand this, what attitude I should have about that. Because remember, it is our culture that regulates our feelings on a whole number of questions. Who is insider, who's outsider, who is us and who is them. These are all deep structures of our culture. It's not something that we have to say explicitly. It's just people know. And because the culture is kind of this internal and innate in this area. So the authors introduced this idea of deep structures and culture that is really way below the surface. Okay. And they also talk about social organizations or social institutions. Okay. Because every culture has institutions. Every culture has organizations that sort of say help it move forward, or help to propel that culture in the traditional trajectory that it has been going for a while. So, and usually when people think about those, they think about family, they think about their community. People may think about a church as being their social organization. Whatever, if they're not a part of a church, then they're part of some other club or group, or some sort of an association of people that embrace ideas, right? So it doesn't have to be religious, but it still could be, it could be a party that they're part of. And if that party still embraces ideals and beliefs and ethics and rules and how one should live, and how one should behave and things like that. So there is the institutions of like, church, family, community. That's something that people usually fall back on, and that's usually what forms their identity in a major way. So on page 70, the authors highlight those three institutions for us. They say family, which sometimes they call clans. It's not just one family, it could be a whole, larger family. Then state or community. So, of course, you can have government, or you can just have kind of loosely organized community. And then you have religion, which doesn't have to be formal religion. It could be a worldview, right? If I embrace a certain philosophy, even if I don't call it religion, it's a worldview that I have. I understand the world this way. And so so those are your deep institutions within the deep structure of the culture. And then they kind of form us. They essentially they outline, how we think. They outline how we understand ourselves. So the authors continue this conversation about deep structure of culture, and explain that most of our confrontations and conflicts And most of the big misunderstandings that we have in our communication can be traced to the cultural differences in the deep structures of culture. This is where we disagree as people from different countries, different places, different worldviews. Whenever we do disagree in a big way, okay, and the most significant disagreements that we may have, they usually go back to that area. They go to the deep structure of our culture, and a lot of times they'll go to the values and ideals and beliefs that are taught by our these primary institutions. Okay, these three that we named. Okay. So the authors give us some good examples, about, how Americans, of course, saw what was going on. And, Americans generally do not like to talk about how, we're a kind of culture that likes killing people, right? But then at the same time, when Osama bin Laden gets killed, it's like this is a big celebration, right? So why? Because Americans look at that not as killing, they look at it as justice. Now, other people look at the other side of the spectrum and they see it the same way, which is why they feel the way they feel. It's justice. So all the wars that United States have been involved in the Middle East, people on the other side say, well, 9/11 is justice. They killed our people, we killed their people. This is justice. This is exactly where you have two cultures looking at the events. Both are, obviously violent events, but they're seeing it from their own side. And whatever their culture tells them, how to see it is exactly how they see it. And these two cultures will always disagree on that. But essentially, that's how it is. So there's a lot of violence that goes on, around the world. But how people see that violence is completely colored by their unique cultural perspective. Okay. And that's where we are going to have wars and conflicts and disagreements over judgments, what is right and what is wrong, and things like that. Is it okay for one country to invade another country? Is it okay for one country to meddle in the affairs of another country? Things like that. So this is where we're going to have these huge disagreements. Now, most of the time, that's where these will come from. Now, the deep structure of culture usually covers several issues the authors outline for us. Like, for example, ideas about God. Whether God is or isn't, whether he exists or doesn't. If he does exist, what's he like? These are cultural, sort of say, deep beliefs. Loyalty. How is loyalty seen? How is loyalty understood? How loyal are we supposed to be? Who are we supposed to be loyal to? Now, a lot of times loyalty is to our own culture, it's to our own people, it's to our own way of life, to our own worldview. What is duty? What is family? Like, what is our patriotic duty? What is our, citizenship duty? What is our duty as a part of this culture? Family, kingship. Like, how much, how much do you stick by your family? And how much do you stick up for people who are part of your culture or group, even when they're wrong or something like that, or you think they're wrong, but still they need your support. So whether we talk about that or community or state, or any type of allegiance, every culture has these components, and they have had these components for thousands of years. And that's why essentially our cultures around the world will not find disagreement, because they have formed these rigid views about what one should do or how one should express himself and what loyalties you should hold. And these loyalties are deeply entrenched. Okay. And these loyalties and feelings are taught and inculcated. They're instilled in people, and it's done on a subconscious level. It's not even something that we expressly set out to do. It just happens. Being a part of the culture, we assimilate these ideas into ourselves. And as we talked about earlier, it's really about being able to navigate successfully within your culture. So you're going to take on these things because you want to succeed, because the culture needs to work for you, because you have to live in it. You have to function within it. And so you cannot be 100% countercultural and be successful. You depend on other people. So you kind of have to go along, essentially. That's the idea. So what deep culture does is deep culture transmits institutions' most important messages, okay? The ideas about right and wrong, cultural ideas about right and wrong are instilled through the deep culture. Why people go through difficulty and suffering, what should one expect from life? That's all instilled in your deep culture. Things like that. How to live life, how to prepare for afterlife, if there's afterlife. How do we live, how do we die, kind of questions. That's all. These most important questions in life are essentially are guided by our cultures, and the deep structures could be family, could be religion, could be community. It could be usually a combination of all three. So now, something that the authors note in this textbook in the first chapter is these institutions that we have, and their messages that they send, they're enduring. They do not simply go away. It's not something that you can subvert so easily. It's not something you can undo. They have been going on for thousands of years, and they stay around. We can fight them sometimes, but they still are very difficult to root out. And they're felt very, very deeply. So the reason why they felt very deeply is, you're probably no doubt familiar with the idea of nationalism. Okay. So nationalism, I don't know how you would define nationalism. It's this idea of loyalty to your own group, right? To your own nation, to your own people. And so whenever these institutions or their deeply held beliefs are being challenged, what rises up is nationalism. That feeling that we're fighting back. We can't give up who we are. We can't stop being ourselves. We can't let someone else tell us who we are and what we're not. So these nationalist ideas rise up whenever society is going through some sort of a redefinition or adjustment. There's always nationalist ideas. So can you guys think of any nationalist ideas? Can you think of any examples that maybe you're familiar with from today or, recent history or something we can put our finger on? And why do these things rise up? What are they trying to achieve, these nationalist notions? Can you think of any? Anyone? Any examples of nationalism? And what is it really tied to is the question. All right. I can't think of any. That's okay. Don't worry. I know I put you on a spot sometimes. Sometimes I just hope for an answer. I'll give you an example. A very common nationalist trend in the West, and we're seeing this now in America, for example, in American politics, is America first. Heard that? Heard that? Okay, you're shaking your heads. Yeah, that's classical nationalism. Okay, America first. What does that mean? It means that whatever we do, as a country, as a people, as a nation, as an economy, whatever, it's all about our national interest. America first. If this does not benefit America, if it benefits some other country, then maybe we shouldn't be doing it. That maybe we should discourage that kind of activity. What we are doing, things that we're doing only because it benefits us first and foremost. If it happens to benefit somebody else as an after effect, as a side effect, okay, that's fine. But what we really care is that we put ourselves first. That's nationalism. Okay. So this is the notion where people who embrace this ideology, people who embrace this type of an idea would be very upset about somebody else taking some American jobs, as they call it, American jobs. They're taking American jobs, right? And they're being taken by somebody else, non-Americans. See what I mean? That's that idea, America first, or overseas jobs, shipping jobs overseas. Something that it was produced in America is now produced somewhere else because it's cheaper to produce it there. Well, in a sense, it is America first because it is an American company that makes the profits, higher profits. But in the other hand, there's a segment of population that suffers because their labor is not being used, and now they can't get a job, and so on and so forth. So this idea of America first is a good example of nationalism. The question is why? Why is this happening right now? Why? Because of the economic situation. Because how many people, are feeling sort of say down. They're feeling that they're not being at the economical advantage. And so the solution is that, well, we have done something to ourselves that is bad. And that means we have allowed the interests of other people and other countries ahead of our own. And that's why we're suffering. So let's stop the suffering by putting our interest back into priority, basically. A very simple, very sane, very kind of easygoing, logical nationalism, but it is a form of nationalism. That's what it is. And that's just an example. So you can have lots of sort of say ideas of nationalism. So here's a question for you, and this is just another illustration. How does it make you feel if somebody took your country's flag and set it on fire in front of you? How would that make you feel? Go ahead. Go ahead, Paul. Paul, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, I think the kind of action makes me angry.
You would feel angry.
Yeah.
Why? It's just the cloth, right? It's just colors.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. But when I was young, we always how to say it, I think we learned I learned how to respect our flag and nation.
There you go.
So yeah, I think it is very make me upset.
So it would make you angry. Yeah, exactly. Which is exactly why people who want to make you angry would do that kind of thing. It would make you angry, it would make you upset. And so how would it make you feel if somebody burned Venezuela's flag? You probably wouldn't care much. You're like, okay, whatever. See this is what we call, that deep culture, that's national affinity that you're feeling, and that's fine. Mateus, did you want to jump in or something?
No, just the same feeling like my friend Paul. When you see your nation or country flag burning, I think you're angry.
Yeah, you're angry, exactly. Yeah. So that's that. So you can feel, we feel for our own, and that's okay. That's because we have that strong cultural connection, that affinity, and you're saying this means something to me. I know it doesn't mean anything to you, but it means something to me, and I can't watch it, happen. So this is why when our communities are hurt, when our families are hurt, where our people, our cultures, our states, our countries are hurt, we feel personally hurt. We feel personally invested emotionally into this. And that's why nationalism exists. America first, like, hey, you're hurting my country. Yeah, we should be first, and if anybody else benefits, that's great. But it's all about us, kind of idea. And it's normal. It's human. It's cultural. So a lot of cultures have nationalism. Let's put it that way. They might not recognize that they have it, but they have it. So very, very strong nationalism. And some religions promote nationalism. Okay, some religions are very, very nationalistic. So if you are not this and that, then you're really backwards, and you need to rethink your life, kind of idea. So a lot of religions push nationalism as well, and they utilize it. So anyway. Okay, good. So I gave you a couple of examples. Even if you guys couldn't come up with some, that's all right. I know I put you on the spot. So much of your identity comes from these deep structures of the culture. And that's exactly why you feel how you feel. So your own personal cultural identification, who you see yourself as, essentially. As you discover who you are in your own culture, you figure out how do you fit in into your country, into your people, okay? And that becomes your self-understanding who you are. So now you are connected to this culture because you have found your way to fit in, whichever way that may be, okay? It's going to differ from person to person, but you are going to embrace some life ways of the culture that you participate in, the culture that you identify with. What those life ways may be different. So people can live in different places and still identify with their primary culture as their original culture in which they were raised at. And so because those life ways, those ways of thinking, those ways of feeling and believing are with them all the time. So your identity sort of flows over into everything you do in life, okay? Everything you do in life really stems from how you learn to fit into your culture and who you are. And so as a result, these deep structures, they don't really go away. They're quite entrenched and they're very influential. And whenever somebody tries to assault them, we rise up. That's where nationalism happens. So we fight back. All right, so let's keep moving forward. On page 73, the authors talk about family, and family is kind of an interesting issue these days. How a culture defines family is different from culture to culture. And basically, there are different types of forms of family. Family is your basic cooperative structure that basically helps to ensure the next generation, raising kids, kind of procreating, things like that. It's a necessary structure. It's a necessary unit. The institution of family is, basically helps the next generation to become productive members of society, right? It teaches them and prepares them for what's next, right? To kind of move everyone forward. So, but there are, of course, different forms and there are different structures of family out there today. Let's see. Besides just giving child a basic type of an upbringing, a basic physical needs, because if you think about it, how do you get your physical needs when you're a child? It's family, right? So you have to have either your family or community providing you the things that you need, like food and clothing and things like that. But then that same community, that same structure, that same unit will provide you your basic first rules of how to live your life. What does it take to be, a member of your society, to function within your culture? So family takes a child, which is pretty much a blank slate, right? And it turns that child into a person who can live in the environment in which they function. Okay, basically successfully navigate this environment and survive and adapt and learn how to succeed and things like that. So family is the first and primary institution that teaches you things. Anything from how you eat, to how you sleep, to how you do business and things like that. I mean, it just teaches you absolutely everything. You learn all of that in your family. How do you express your feelings, things like that. And it's our identity is usually forged within a family first and foremost. Basically, as people develop their own sense of self, their personality, that is usually happens within a family. Now, how do we define family? I mean, the families are kind of really, really diverse these days because, of course, a lot of times when people think family, if you come from a traditional culture, if you come from a traditional point of view, let's say like this Judeo-Christian definition of family is mom and dad and kids, right? That's family. But there's other types of families out there, right? There are families without kids. Well, they're not going to be families for long because if they don't have any kids and they don't adopt, that's going to be pretty much the end of that family, right? It's not going to go on. But there are families with, people divorced and rejoined and blended. There are families that have broken apart and rejoined with others. So there's these blended families. There are single parent families out there where there's just mom and kids, or there's just dad and kids, and or extended family members living together. All sort of say there's so many different types of families. There's stepchildren and step parents, and there's adopted families. Today there are so many non-traditional families. We have like all sorts of gender choices, like you have gays have families, right? Two men get together, get married, adopt children. That's normal now in America. That doesn't really fit into this Judeo-Christian definition of family anymore, right? So it got expanded, let's put it that way. It's because we have so much freedom in this country, we have so many different kinds of families. Other countries don't have that. Okay, there's plenty of places in this world where two men cannot get married and adopt a child and call it a family. There's many places in the world where it's not going to happen at all. In fact, there are some places in the world, if two men even say that this is what they want to do, they will end up being executed. So it's just the world we live in. That's culture. That's difference. It's quite diverse. So what is a family? It's a difficult one to define, but basically it's just a unit of people living together and making it in life together, whatever form that may take. Now, the authors talk about different forms of family, and they mention a couple of terms here: nuclear family and extended family. That's something that I really definitely want you to know. So what is the difference between nuclear family and extended family? How does that work? Anybody? How do you understand nuclear and extended? Go ahead.
Nuclear family is a traditional family, a man and a woman and kids.
Okay. And what's extended family?
Extended, it's when includes the rest of the parents, grandparents, and uncles, and all that family.
Right. Good. So that's kind of how it works. That's good. Now, what is your Addison? Tell me, what is your view of family when you think of family personally? Do you think of just mom and dad and kids, or do you think broader in your own cultural perspective?
Yeah, my conception is my mom, my dad, and my brothers, and my siblings, and my grandparents. My family, and my conception of family, it's all my grandparents, my uncles. This is my family.
How about cousins?
Cousins, yeah.
Cousins too.
Yeah.
So, if people maybe even living halfway around the world from you that you don't get to see anymore, you're still like family, right?
It's my family.
Still see them that way.
Yeah, I have family in Germany.
There you go.
Family here in Brazil. I have family around the world.
And if they get in trouble, you're going to help them out, right?
Yeah.
Because they're part of your family. And that's just, you feel like this is what we do. Yeah. Perfect. Fantastic. Exactly what I wanted to hear. Thank you, Addison. So here, Addison, for example, his view of family is extended. He sees the extended family as family. Okay. Now, some people do not. A more individualistic oriented society, somebody who comes from very individualistic society, they will only see their family living within their household, and usually just their own parental unit and them as their family. That's it. That's about as far as it goes. It's not going to go to uncles and aunts. It's not going to go to cousins. It's not going to go to second or third or fourth cousins or anything like that. Like, forget it. Those people, we don't even know who they are. Yeah, we're related. They're going to say we're relatives, but we're not really family or anything like that. So that really depends on your culture, how you're going to see it. Some cultures see nuclear family as family. Other cultures see the extended family as family. So let me ask you a question. Does any one of you have people within your family, okay, however you define your family, who are not even your family, that you're actually not related to them? Kind of like this person that you call uncle, who's not really an uncle, or an aunt who's not really an aunt. They just kind of hang out with you, and every time you have a big family get together, they're always there, but they're not related. Not by blood, not by marriage. There's just like friend of a family that you pretty much treat like a family. and sometimes may even refer to them as a family. Do you guys have anybody like that?
I think
No.
everybody.
You think
Sure.
everybody?
I think everybody have somebody like this. Like I have some friends like brother of me. So
Okay. So some of your friends, you feel like they're brothers. The question is, does the rest of your family accept them like that? That's what's important. See, you can feel closeness to somebody and you can say, hey, I have this friend who's like my brother, right? The question is, does the rest of your family see them that way? And do they accept them that way? And do they treat them that way? See what I
I
mean?
got you.
Have a friend. He's really a good friend. And when someone married, oh, call your friend, bring your friend. All my family, like my uncles, my cousins, and it's part of a family.
Yeah. So you have friends now who are also part of your family. You see what I mean? This is what we call truly an extended family. Okay. That is the true definition of an extended family. It even includes people who are not related to you by blood or by marriage, and you still call them family. See, that's a true extended family. Because I tell you this, so many of us have this uncle or aunt or somebody who just kind of always out there living on the couch somewhere out, out there with somebody, and you treat them like family. Every time you have a family get together, you invite them over and they're part of it. And so I know I have that in my family. It's like we always, even with our kids, sometimes we call somebody aunt or uncle. Well, not really their aunt or uncle. They're just really, really close friends of our family. But they count in as much as our family, and they get included in everything we do. So that's quite normal. But you see, this is why it's so important, because if you have this idea of an extended family, because now think of how many people have an input in your life, and think of how many people are communicating culture to you and sort of say influencing you to think this way. They reinforce these ideas. Your parents may teach those ideas, but other people within your community, within your big extended family, reinforce those same ideas. And if you have a certain sense of unity, you pretty much catch on really fast to what you're supposed to do or think or believe and things like that. Now, globalization affects families. There's a section here on globalization in a big way, because right now our families are spread out. So, like Addison's telling me, hey, my family is here, my family's there. I got a family in Germany. I got a family in Brazil. They're all over the place. And, this is a sort of a little bit of a stressor on our families. This changes our families. Whenever families stay in the same location, they are able to support their culture fairly strongly. But what happens when your family migrates to another place and they live somewhere else and they work somewhere else and they make their life there? You're still family with them, but you feel a little bit of adrift. Why? Because now they're living in a different culture and they're starting slowly to take on features of that culture. So I'm going to ask you guys a question, and this is a personal question again. Yeah, I like to ask you personal questions, but I feel like we can cross this line. So, have any of your friends or your family members, since you've kind of lived in America, told you that you have become an American or you've become too Americanized? Have they played that one on you? Tell me. Have they thrown that card at you? Oh, you're so American now.
I think this happened with the kids when coming like a babes or then the growing up with the another culture and total different than our culture. Sometimes most of the times the kids just speaking with each other just in English, no more in your matter language. And I think everything is changed with these kids. They prefer here than they don't
want to speak Portuguese. They want to speak English, right?
Yeah.
That's their choice, their preference.
Yeah, my kids speak with each other just in English.
Right.
With us, me and my wife, they speak in Portuguese,
Right.
but they prefer English.
That's right. That's their personal preference. It's funny how they're making that choice. It's not like you're making them make that choice. It's not like you encourage them to make that choice. They're doing it all on their own. Now, why are they doing that? Is because the culture that they're surrounded by is English speaking, and they're making choice to speak between themselves. Now, even if they can speak in Portuguese, they're able. They're just not interested. They're not willing. It shows that they're prioritizing English language over their own cultural language from which they come. So it's like, you know, they're slowly kind of moving into that territory. They're being Americanized, right? And that's actually normal. That's how it happens in America with pretty much everyone. I mean, look, the same thing with my kids. You know, my kids, I can't teach them Russian. I can't teach them Hebrew. I can't teach them anything. And so my wife and I, we speak in languages we want to speak to each other when we don't want the kids to know what in the world we're saying. So like I try to switch languages on them all the time, because if I want them to know something, I'll just start in Hebrew, and then my wife understands, and so we're okay. Where I would have no idea what I just said. They're like, "Oh, teach me Hebrew." Well, why? Because I want to know what you're talking to mommy about that you don't want me to know about. So things like that. But it's tricky. It's tricky. Sometimes you have to have 2 or 3 languages to hide things from kids. But you could see how globalization is essentially affecting your own family. You know, if you got family living in different places, they're becoming more blended with the culture that they're living in. Their kids are becoming more and more blended, much more than adults. You know, quicker, faster, and that is producing a bit of a strain on families now, because now it's hard to keep the family unity together. Okay. It's really, really hard to do that. So with parents, with grandparents, with extended family, it's even harder. So there's misunderstandings arise of all sorts. So, but that's a survival issue. Remember, globalization is about success and survival, and it's about doing better economically, which is why we spread out so much, you know, across the globe, because we're looking for, you know, opportunities that would not be possible or available to us where we are at the moment. What happens to these traditional family values is the key, right? Question is, are you able to transmit your traditional family values of your culture besides the language? Let's put it that way. Are you able to transmit those to your kids? You know, you kids, you know, even if they grow up in America, do they become culturally American by values, or do they still hold on to some of the cultural values which you yourself, you know, perhaps have? So that's the deeper question. So cultures tend to do that. They tend to want to do that, and they continue that, even in when they're in the environment that's, you know, foreign turf, sort of say, not your native soil. So let's keep moving. Page 78, 79, the traditional functions of family that we're looking at. Of course, there's the reproductive function. Without families, we don't really have future. No kids, no next generation. Culture dies. The easiest way to kill culture is to make sure they don't have any kids, right? That's it. So that's how you can destroy a people. And there are some people that have practically disappeared. I mean, think about it. There are entire nations and countries and people groups that do not exist anymore. They have been basically, the birth rate has gotten so low, and however many people they had, they were assimilated into a more dominant culture, and that's it. And so as a distinct culture and as a distinct people group, they no longer exist. Maybe sometime back they can draw many generations back, but they've lost that. Now they're gone. So that happens. So the reproductive function is the basic function. The economic function, of course, is important because families is what allows us to survive, right? We need food, clothing, and shelter, and that's what family provides. Whether we're talking about nuclear family, extended family, that's what family provides. Family is that basic fundamental unit of people you're close to, you know, and so The other function of the family is the socialization function. The way that we learn how to be a part of a society, the way how we learn how to get along in this world is by watching family, right? Whether we talk about saying hello or greeting people, we talk about practicing manners at the table, things like that. Family teaches you how to behave in your own culture, in your environment. What is okay and what is not okay. That's what you learn. These basic social functions, emotions. How do you express love? How do you express sorrow? How do you express pride? How do you express respect? How do you show honor? These things you learn in family. You don't learn them from the textbook. You don't learn them in school. You learn them at home. Your parents are the ones who teach them to you. If your parents are not there, then it's grandparents. If grandparents are not there, then it's aunts, uncles, anybody who is out there that is you see as your family will teach you those things, and you will pick them up automatically. So it's not something that you have to be told how to do. You do that by observing, by noting people, by watching their behaviors, and then emulating them. So the family, social function is important. The language acquisition function is another one. Of course, we learn our languages from our family. That's our primary mechanism. So if Mateus speaks at home in Portuguese with his wife, so the kids are going to learn Portuguese, and that's going to happen. It's going to happen to them. That's normal. They may still make their choices, to prefer English, but they're going to know Portuguese. They're not going to get away from that. Why? Because you put them in an environment where they basically have to, in order to function, in order to get some food in the morning. Okay, they're going to need to do Portuguese. That's the idea. So it becomes a necessity, and that's normal. Now, family function, sort of say. People, one of the family functions that's really important. Okay, the language function is good, but the identity function is really the key. This is kind of where we have to zero in on a little bit. Most people, and when I speak of identities, what is identity? Identity is how do you see yourself? How do you fit into the world? How do you identify? Who are you? That's your identity. Identity is not an easy question. I mean, and it doesn't really have a simple answer. It's complicated. Now, most people do not have one identity. Most people have multiple identities, or their identity, let's put it this way, is a blend of multiple factors. Okay? We're not monolithic. We can't just say, I'm an American, I'm a Brazilian. So you just can't say that. That's not who you really are. You're so much more, right? If I was to ask you to define yourself, you'd have to say, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, and you're going to keep going down the list. And so there are multiple identities to you. Your individual identity is one thing. Your national identity could be another thing. Your occupational identity could be another thing. Your cultural identity can be another thing. Social class identity, family identity, religious identity, sexual identity, whatever. People can say all sorts of things about themselves, and usually they say that because this is a part of who they are. That's a part of their own, sort of say, sense of self. So imagine each person almost like being a pie, okay? And you can slice that pie in a variety of different ways. So for some people, certain parts of their identity is huge. Other parts of their identity are small. Like, for example, how big is a part of your identity sports? Okay, is somebody here a huge sports fan? Somebody who loves sports, like it's a big part of your life. All right, so a huge part of your life. Okay, so like if there's a sport event that goes on and it's your team and it's your favorite sport, you're gonna forego some other things. Your friends call you out, say, "Hey, let's go out to dinner," and you're like, "Oh, I'd really love to, but such and such team is playing, and I don't want to miss it. I want to see it live. I want to see it happen. I'm not going anywhere." Or something important is going on in your life. You have friends getting married, and then there's World Cup going on, and you got tickets. and you're going to say, what should I do? These people getting married or tickets to the World Cup? And you're just like, yeah, I don't know. See, this is how you know how much of that is a big part of your identity. How big it is going to determine the decision you're going to make. Okay. And so some parts of our identity are huge to us. Other parts of our identity are not big to us. Like, for example, somebody says, I'm a Christian. Well, how big is that part of your identity, right? I'm this religion, I'm that religion. Well, how important is it? Is this a big deal for you? Do you make decisions based on that? Are you participating in this religion weekly, daily, hourly, or is this something that you do 5 times a year or something like that? Is it only on Sunday? Is it only on Saturday? Is it only on Thursday? Is this once a week deal? Or is this a daily thing? Is this an hourly thing? Is it how much of your life is invaded by your religion? Is the question. Do you dress based on your religion? Do you eat based on your religion? Do you read books based on your religion? Do you choose entertainment based on your religion? How much of your life is enveloped in that part of your identity? And that's what I mean by different slices of the pie. You can take that pie, and some slices are going to be big, other slices are going to be small. Like somebody's going to say, I'm a man or I'm a woman, right? Well, how much is that part of your identity? For some people, it's a huge deal. They're like, I am a female business owner. I'm like, that's great. To me personally, I care that you're a business owner. The fact that you're a female business owner versus male business owner, I kind of tend to deal with people. Either you're a business person or you're not a business person. Is you're a good one or a bad one, successful, unsuccessful. I don't really care whether you're male or female. Like to me, the gender of it doesn't really have to do much with your business, but to somebody else, it's like, oh, this is a big deal for me. I'm a male business owner. I'm a female business owner, whatever that may be. And people stress that aspect of their identity. Why? Because their femininity or their masculinity means a lot to them. Okay. It's something big, where for me, it may not be big, but for them, it's huge. So how your pie is sliced is going to be different. So you have a number of these identities, whether it be social or familial or individual or national origin or occupational. You may say, hey, I'm a lawyer. You can't talk to me like this. I'm a lawyer. Or I'm a judge, something like that. Like, you can't address me like this. I'm a judge. I'm like, no, you're my friend. No, I'm a judge. Like, all right, everyone stand. The order, court is in session. Things like that. And these things can be a huge, big deal to people. So I tell people all the time. I said, you have to give me a break. I'm a teacher. That's what I do. If I start lecturing, you have to forgive me, because it's my occupation. It's who I am. It's what I do all the time. So if I just go on and on for a long time and I try lecturing everybody, I said, you have to give me a break. I'm not trying to be mean. It's just who I am. It comes out that way. So anyway, that's our identity. And so family establishes that function within us. It kind of gives us a number of these identities and how important they are. Because if you think about it, if certain religious understanding came as a part of your family, if being educated came as a family value to you, or any sort of ethnic ties that you have, their family, they have been basically instilled into you at a very early age, and they became a part of who you are, your identity. And now you can't even take it out, even if you wanted to. It'd be hard. So essentially, that's, we'll talk more about identity later on. This is a big part of who we are, and it's a big part of how we communicate. I tell people all the time that, if I start lecturing, that's, it's because of who I am. It's part of my identity. My wife actually gets mad at me all the time. She's like, don't repeat everything 5 times to me. I'm not your student. So I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah, I do repeat things a lot of times because I want people to remember them, but that's part of a teaching technique. All right. So page 80, cultural variance and family interaction. There are important things that we learn in family, and one of them is basically how families interact. There's a lot of differences. Some families have very clearly defined gender roles. Other families, not so much. There's man stuff that men do in a family. There's guy things, okay, that guys do. And there's girl things that girls do in a family. Now, some families are like that. They're very rigid. Girls do their things and guys do their things. Okay? And they're very gender biased and they're very gender oriented, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's part of culture. It's part of the internal family dynamic. Can you think of something that, in your family experience that, like, women do and men don't really participate in, and vice versa? And that will go to little girls and, grandmas, and the same thing will happen with, grandpas and even little guys. They'll kind of be huddled together and be forced to do certain things because that's just how things work in the family. What do you think about it? Just cultural things. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think in Brazil, many years ago, that's work like this. The men work outside, and the woman work inside at home.
Right.
But now I think this change, and everybody needs work right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody works outside now. So
Yeah,
then
everybody.
that means everyone works inside too. When you
Yeah.
get home, you can't just say, "Oh, honey, dishes, that's your department."
Yeah.
No. You get to do it too. Yeah, so the culture has changed, and that's because we're all working. And so we all have jobs, we all have employment. So historically, women had a lot fewer opportunities for employment in many cultures, including yours. You're talking about that. So there's some things that men do, and there's some things that women do. So here's this. Like, if you have a big family get together, right? Imagine this, whatever, holiday, celebration, birthday, whatever. Do you notice that a bunch of women's going to hang out in the kitchen and do stuff, and men are going to stay out of it, right? Or maybe it's the other way around. I don't know. Maybe in your culture, it's a bunch of men who are going to get together. So, all right. So here's the American culture. I'm having a barbecue. Okay. I'm grilling, burgers, steaks, whatever, who do you think is going to be operating the grill? In American culture? Why?
I don't know.
If women operate the stove, why can't they operate the grill?
Yeah, I think the woman operate a grill is like a sin.
See, you get it, because you already have this predisposition, and I'm picking on you on purpose, which is fine, and you're letting me pick on you because you have that predisposition to expect that it's going to be men who are going to be grilling, and women are going to stay away from the grill. They're not going to mess with charcoal. They're not going to mess with grill tools or anything like that. They're just going to leave it to guys, let the guys play with fire and do their stuff and cook their meat. I'll cook the potatoes. I'll cook the veggies. I'll cook everything else. Let him handle the meat. So it's stereotypical, right? And that's expected. But see, this is how we learn. This is how we learn that grilling is the man's thing, okay? But cooking on a stove is a woman's thing. See, our families communicate that. Our parties communicate that just because we do it that way. Now, in some cultures, it's the other way around. Men are supposed to be the chefs in a family. In fact, world famous chefs, just for fun, mostly men or women? What do you think? World famous chefs, mostly men or mostly women? I'm going to tell you right now, the answer is mostly men. The most highest paid chefs in the world, in the most expensive exclusive restaurants, usually men. So you see how our gender bias about, cooking is a woman's thing, and, all of a sudden it breaks down. It breaks down. Just turn on the Food Network on TV or something like that. Watch it, and you'll see how many of guys out there are very, very good at the kitchen and know what they're doing. So our cultural values, what our family teaches, is not always entirely accurate. But we have these gender roles pinned down, and our families are the ones who teach us these gender roles, right? So, but the culture changes all the time, and sometimes what family teaches you doesn't, line up exactly. So let's run through a couple of cultures over here just for fun. Page 82, 83. We have cultures that are being defined. How are gender roles defined in the United States? How are gender roles defined in Asia, for example? In the United States, you kind of have pretty fairly outlined gender roles. Okay. Children in U.S. begin to learn their gender roles very early on. We have everything from room colors, how the way we paint the walls, right? The clothing that we have, everything is going to be different. The length of hair, in American culture, things like that. Girls are going to have long hair and boys are going to have short hair, and this is how we're going to do it. That's traditional culture. It's normal. So very early on, very, very quickly, kids will learn these things. That's something interesting in American culture. As they grow up, boys are socialized to be much more assertive, much more ambitious, much more aggressive, and competitive. I mean, these are the all the features of male culture in America. What is prized and what is valued is men will have to be a certain way. So they'll have to be rational, logical, sometimes dominant, sometimes distant, things like that. So they're going to be a certain way, and this is taught again by mainstream culture. Now girls will be socialized to be nurturing and sensitive and dependent. Sometimes they would be concerned with appearance. There's a lot of appearance concerning values that are being instilled in girls very early on. You have to look a certain way. You have to spend, so much time making yourself look a certain way. There's a certain amount of passivity and quietness that will be implied, and emotion is allowed, and so it's kind of going along and cooperating. So you could see how these gender roles in America, these are traditional gender roles. It doesn't mean that most Americans are going to be that way, but these are traditional gender roles that are usually, typical to majority of the culture. Okay, they will be instilled very early on children, and so as a result, American men and American women will come out to be that way. Okay, that they will fall into those gender roles which the culture tries to make them into, and so you could see how this really works out. Of course, there's going to be culture. There's going to be all sorts of customs and traditions and things that we do that will reinforce that, even down to the barbecue, right? The idea of having a barbecue, the little things like that, like we having a party. Well, you don't realize that it's really reinforcing cultural ideals, and it's teaching you what is right and what is wrong, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, by simply you participating in this ritual. 4th of July barbecue. Like, if in a 4th of July barbecue in America, I decided to have it, to have, let's say, 4th of July, I decided to have a nice Chinese meal. That's going to be a problem, right? Hey, I'm going to order some sushi. Bring me some great sushi. And I was like my friends would say, what is wrong with you? You're supposed to be firing up the grill and cooking some hamburgers or something like that, hot dogs or something. And it's just countercultural, right? I can't do that. So, so there's these cultural expectations upon us. Okay. Now, so that's families in U.S. Now, in Asian families are a little bit different. What you have is, in the United States, of course, the major influence is Christianity, Judeo-Christian religions, ideas like that. In Asia, you have the influence of Confucianism, for example. And so the child raising going to be different. The values are going to be different. The message is going to be different. Now, in American families, who's in charge? It's always patriarchal. It's always men who are in charge, right? Men are seen as the final decision makers. They're the movers. They're the shakers. They're the ones who are going to basically put their fist down and say, this is how it is. right? So a male role is very dominant and very pronounced in a typical, United States family. Like I said, not all families are typical. When I talk about these things, and when the textbook talks about these things, they speak in generalities. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of exceptions out there. But many Asian families are going to have this Confucianism, and the perspective that Confucianists bring. It's going to affect the way they raise their kids. So because we will have this ideals of a male-dominated society also coming from Confucianism, Asian societies are going to be male-dominated as well. So as I'm reading this section here, the authors talk about the woman's greatest duty is to produce a son. That's straight from the culture. So this is taught that sons are preferred over daughters. Is that true? Is that true? Yeah? Kyung, you say true.
Well, actually, it was true. It's a long time ago, but in ancient time, because at that time, is a boys only permitted to have a role in society, any kind of officers. But as
Sure.
now, but now it does not matter whether women have son or daughters, because the society has been changed, and the law is established is for women. They are not discriminated compared to men. So I think it was right. It was right, because even though the boys only be a person who will be heritated, even the money and the slavers, I mean, real estate, anything at all. Well, girls could not be heritage from anything from their ancestor. But nowadays, girls have a saying in the regal. Women can make same legal action compared to men. So that's why it doesn't matter boys or women, whether, So I think it's getting, that
it's
kind
changing.
of,
Obviously it's changing because our whole world is changing. Our values of not just Asian cultures, but values of other cultures are changing. You're absolutely right, Hyun. And that's understood. But when I say traditionally, when I say majority, how much would a family celebrate a son or something like that? Somebody has a big business going, somebody has this massive empire, and what do they want? Do they ask for a daughter? If they pray, if they hope, do they ask for a daughter to inherit that empire, or do they ask for a son to inherit that empire? And it's the traditional cultural values. They're still kind of in the back, but they're always there. It's not that they're not all gone. That even though there's equality and opportunity and things like that, they're still there. I mean, some of that exists in American culture as well, but I think in Asian culture it's much more pronounced, where people have preferences. It's not that somebody's going to be sad, oh, a girl was born, they're not going to cry over it. But if it is their wish, sort of say, they would want a son, and it's typical like that in many Asian cultures, and not just Korean or Chinese, or it's much broader than that. It's Japanese, it's Mongolian as well, things like that. The majority of homes are male dominated. So again, the gender roles are very clearly outlined. In some Asian cultures, like in Japan, for example, the authors talk about where the boys are indulged and pampered, even allowed to be a little bit unregulated. So pretty much kind of do whatever you want to do. Boys. Now with girls, they have a very different treatment. They're much more strict with them, much more restricted, much more instruction, much more, much less freedom, let's put it that way, to do whatever you want to do. So again, it's just the tendencies of indulging or restricting you could see where kind of like the gender roles in those families will be different, from culture to culture. So that's something that the authors presented us on the Asian culture. Now, Latino culture, and they actually, I like the fact that in this book, the authors explain the difference between Latino and Hispanic. I think that's kind of cool. A lot of people do not understand that. They don't get it at all. But I like how he explains that, hey, Hispanic is usually reference to language. Not everyone who lives in Latin America speaks Spanish. And this is where my Brazilian friends go, yeah. So, that's the idea. But a lot of people don't know that. Again, it's just ignorance, and so the terms do get used interchangeably, and that's how the authors will use them. They don't mean anything by them. They're just common terms. Latino is somebody who's from Latin America, historically speaking. So, and there's many countries in Latin America, and not all of them speak Spanish. And so that's the idea. But a lot of times when people in American perception, when somebody is Latino, it means Mexican. Okay, that just equal signs to Mexican. So sorry for everyone else who is not Mexican from Latin America, you're going to get marginalized, because most of the time Americans experience somebody from Latin America, it's going to be somebody from Mexico, and that's how they see everybody, and that's the majority, and that's the brush you get painted with. So you're going to get lumped in, you're going to get lumped in with that culture. And you're not alone. Because there's others out there as well. I had a student from South Africa, and he's African. Guess what? He's not black. He's white. And he's African. Why? Because he was born and raised there. His family is from there. His family's been there for generations, many generations. He doesn't have any other culture except African. That's who he is. He's African. When he tells people he's African, people look at him and like, "What's wrong with you? Are you crazy?" And like, "Yeah, I'm African." That's it. So but that's not what most people think when they hear the word African, right? And that's so the same thing with Latino. And sorry, guys, that's just how it's going to happen. So there's some interesting things that the authors talk about Latino families. There's a certain sense of sacredness that he talks about, and importance of the family at the core of Latino cultures. So family is like everything. If you don't have family, you're a big time missing out. You just cannot get along in the world without family. That's how it's family so fundamental that it's seen as everything. Losing a family, not having a family, is seen as the worst tragedy there is. So now the family gender roles are very interesting. It's the authors say here, says for Latina female gender roles, the term let's see, Marianismo, I've never really even heard that term that much, is often used when talking about women being focused primarily on the family while at the same time being subservient to males. I don't know how much of that is true, but there is a male sort of say focused idea in Latin American cultures, where males are still seen as heads of households, and females are still very much involved. A lot of the home life, of course, falls to females. But the question is, how much influence do males and females have in Latin culture? Okay. And one thing that we have to recognize, and this is not typical of just the Latin culture, it's typical of many cultures, is that women actually exert a massive amount of influence on a family because they get to raise the children. They are seen as primary caretakers. So guess what? Who teaches children right from wrong most of the time? It's women. Who teaches them how to do a lot of things in life? Most of the time, it's women. And so at some cultures, children get handed over to fathers at a certain age, and the fathers become their primary instructor. And that's a very interesting function in some cultures. But in some cultures, once you get it set that way, it never stops. It just, so there's a lot of influence. There's ability to influence culture and create character in people, develop their character. But usually in Latin American and Mexican culture, and particularly, father occupies the dominant role. He's the breadwinner. He's a protector. He provides things for family. He basically controls how well the family does or doesn't do. So that whole economic factor is really important. It's the father in the family who makes the major decisions and sets the disciplinary standards. His word is final, and the rest of the family looks to him for guidance and strength. That's what the textbook says. I'm reading straight out of the textbook here on page 85. So I think generally speaking, that's true. Obviously, there are exceptions, but there is a certain respect for fathers in Latin American families and Mexican families in particular. And there's always that sense of deference and saying, all right, whatever he says goes. You know, why? Because we respect him, because we show him honor. He's important, you know, can't really live without him. Let's put it that way. So it kind of goes into that direction. It's a positive image. It's a good thing. So we have a couple more families. Let's take a break, guys, here. Let's stretch out. How about 10 minutes, and then we come back and we'll jump into the second part of this chapter. I want to run over across here Indian and Arab families, and then several more topics that we talk about, collectivism and things like that. So let's take a little break, and we come back. We'll pick it up in 10 minutes. So 10:18. I'll see you guys in 10 minutes. 10:28. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna pause here with the recording.